Hey guys, regardless what you're building, there's a lot of cool tips, tricks, and just some normal everyday guidance. I hope you stick around to watch it all. It is time to get the landing gear assembled, and we're going to start with the front and then go into the back. So the landing gear does have what appears to be a leading and trailing edge to it, so I am going to put the flat or the untapered part on the front side. When it comes down to these spats, if you will, they have a wider end and a more narrow end. I'm going to place the wider end towards the front, and it doesn't specify in the manual either one, so the wider end seems to fit better to the contour of the plane than going the other direction. But we'll be wider first and then trail down to the point with those. And I'm going to center the gear on the inside. Now, they give you springs to hook to the rudder tiller arm, which makes sense why we did the rudder before we did the landing gear. So for what that's worth. And the bolts for the bottom of the landing gear, I've added a lock washer in there, which they did not mention. They just wanted a flat washer, and I'll tell you why that would still be fine, but I like the lock washer for a little bit added method. On the inside, they want you to use lock nuts. Now, something I'll caution you guys about: Loctite is usually the standard here, especially the blue stuff to put on all these threads. When you run all of that into here, there'll probably still be some remnants on these threads, and Loctite eats plastic and rubber. So with that being said, if I use a lock nut, my fear is that it will eventually just erode away at that plastic. It would probably still stay there and not fall out. So anyway, I'm not using the Loctite on those bolts, and that's usually a no-no. But because I have lock washers and because I have self-locking nuts on the inside, guys, it ain't going to go anywhere. With the back on the tail wheel, I'm going to replace that hardware. I'm going to add just a little bit of bling stuff on the back. There's no self-locking nuts in there, so I am going to make sure I use Loctite on those. And when it comes down to getting the axles in, don't forget to flat spot these over, whether you take them to a sander, a grinder, whatever you're going to do, so the collars have a good place to bite on. And a little tip there, I always apply some canopy glue underneath those as I slide them into place, because that will eventually harden and basically kind of glue them and prevent vibration from falling, keep them from falling out. So those will go in. The springs will simply just loop through that little tiller arm there. You make it the right length, cut the other side, and away you go. If you want to leave it adjustable, I guess you can just get those little push rod connectors in there, and that would leave you some adjustment in case something is off. Now, for the wheel pants, they give you these little 3 by 10 millimeter screws, I think they were. They actually in the kit give you a lot of O-rings, and although they don't specify what the O-rings are for, I'm assuming the O-rings will go underneath things like those screws in order to keep them tight, keep them from vibrating loose, and provide some tension, because those things will actually be right here, all right? I guess through the inside. But what I am going to do is I'm using some of these rubber bonded washers to prevent the vibration and to space out a little bit of pressure around the outside of those blind nuts. So that way we know how rough we are on wheel pants, but that will get us some extra protection, if you will. But anyway, let's dig into getting this stuff on before we call it a night. All right, we have our 4.5-inch rudder tiller arm in there, and you guys can now see as we go side to side, we still have tension and tension in this thing, and that's exactly what you want, tension and tension in there. So that setup right now is perfect. Put a little bit of bling on there. So now it's time to get into the tail of this thing. You can see that we have all of our linkage and our custom covers on there done. We're using the Hansen Hobbies polarized connectors, so that way everything is removable. And my buddy Ronnie London had made and designed these holders for the other side of the polarized connector. So what I'm going to do is affix a plate here on the inside, and then I'm going to place these things in here, so that way they will sit recessed into that pocket, and ultimately I can easily just plug and unplug without any safety locks. Now, with that being said, there's some modifications here that are needed. As you can see, this thing will slide. It has the dowel rod there. Connector will click and go into there like that. And now this recess, your horizontal stab should fit right in there. And on this side, it does not. So I took a pen and I outlined here to see what modifications are necessary, and you can see that it's mostly covering, but there is a little bit of this that I'm just going to need to clean up with a Dremel tool, so this fits right in the pocket. I'll show you guys the other side here, and this one fit right on the money. So a little bit of modification here needed for the balsa. Not a big deal. Let's get to hacking. So that cleanup was very quick and simple, no issues there. And you can see now we'll slide this in. That dowel fits in there, and now you can see how nice and flat our ears sit in there. So we have a nice positive hold, but looks good. Let's go ahead and see if we can make some pieces for the inside and get those connectors in place. All right, check it out. Horizontals are put in. Look at all that bling. How nice does that look, guys? Nice and clean installation. Got some bling in there to dress it up. The wiring on the inside is all run through those channels right there, and we will put convolute over that once I'm assured of the location I want my receiver, but I left everything long so I can slide the convolute down over it and down through that channel. Receiver 24900 will probably get mounted up here, but so far so good. Rudder, elevators. What do you say we get to putting an engine in this bad boy? Let's do it. In the next step in this process, we're going to begin the engine mounting. We're using a DA50 for this model. So in the package, you will see a canister mount. This thing will actually slide down in here. Obviously, that depends on whether or not we're actually going to for sure use the canister mount or not. But that piece will literally slide down over to carbon spars to help support your canister. So that's included, and this really cool template. Since we're using the DA50, you could see here that we're using the little doghouse looking pictures. And this is a really nice template to fit over here to get your exact drilling locations. Now, what I did notice that isn't super exciting is that there is a little bit of play here. We can clean that up when we shim the cowl a little bit, but I would hope that that would have fit spot on, so you don't really know if you're this way, that way, or whatever. But regardless, we're going to drill some pilot holes in this first. Simply taking a small 16th, finding the center of the doghouse there, and we're going to do each one of these. All right, now that we have that done, we're going to put that there, and we're going to transfer those same holes, and then there'll be pilot for ultimately a 1/4 inch. Now these are the standoffs that came with the kit. So we are just going to kind of dry fit these and see what they look like. Now they want blind nuts on the inside, and they came in the kit. All right, guys, let's go ahead and grab the cowling and give it a test fit and see what it looks like. All right, so we're pretty close on the cowl. I mean, that gets me an idea anyway. We do have to go in, oh, I would say probably a good inch yet, but I think we are on the money here. So what I'm going to do next is we're going to flip it over on a stand. We're going to tape in a big piece of cardboard stock and have it come out here. It'll be taped here and come out here. And then what we are going to do is cut the cardboard stock to fit around here. We'll pull the engine off, put the cowling back on, and then we know where to trim our cowl in order to fit that. But also with this being mounted now, I know the drop I can anticipate and start getting some measurements to do a canister, if that's what we are going to do. There's an awful lot of room here to also do a pit style muffler. So I think we're going to weigh this out literally, and we'll look at the weight differences. I'd like it quieter, but I'd also like it to weigh less. So we're going to have to do some research, but I think that's going to be a wrap for tonight, and we will be back at this tomorrow, guys. Let's do some research. All right, now we've gone ahead and installed our cardboard template. It's taped onto the fuselage far enough back to allow the cowl to slide on. And all you do is you overlay this onto your engine and notch out the cardboard. Now that the cardboard is all cut out, we'll remove the engine off of there, install the cowl, overlay this against it, and now we know where to cut out in order to get that engine to fit. And then it'll be some just fine edge trimming to make it look nice and perfect. So moving on with the cowl, you can see we trimmed up our exhaust vent here. A lot of people say 2-to-1, 3-to-1 for exit. You just want more exit than you have inlet. Also, you notice when you cut the fiberglass, whether it's in the front or the back, you start to see this fiberglass edge. A lot of people don't like that. Simple trick, black paint marker, and we'll clean that up. Now here on the sides, to get our bolt holes correct, what I've done is take an index card and tape it to the side of the plane, and you just literally fold it right into that position and overlay your screw holes. So we've done this on both sides, and what you'll do now is you will take your cowling and you'll fit your cowl on there. We're going to have to prep our spinner at this point also, because you want the back plate. We're simply going to slide this cowling on. Like that. We are going to tape it in place to hold our center location here. So this is where the spinner back plate is going to be important, because you can use that to center over the big ring here, and also to get your back spacing correct. Once that's set in place, which probably is pretty close to the way it is, you're simply going to lay these over, and that's where all your bolt holes go. Once I remove the cowl, I'll wick some CA into the back to harden that fiberglass area for some extra support, and you'll have a perfectly drilled, cut, and clean cowling. In the next step, we're going to go ahead and mount our fuel tank. Now that we have the engine secured, I will go over the whole back of this and seal this with a thinned epoxy. So we're just going to take some fast drying 5-10 minute epoxy and mix a little bit of rubbing alcohol, and we're going to brush that in. And I'm actually going to brush it over the back of the nuts, those threads, to keep those from ever wanting to come loose, and seal the back half of this wood and the front side in here, because we do get some of the splashback fuel out of the carburetor, so you don't want that to soak in. So we are going to seal that. We have our tank location figured out. Now, I did go with the Seacraft round tank, and one of the reasons that I chose to do this is, although the difference is small and people fly square tanks and have for, 100 years now, the round ones just give you a tiny hair advantage that the clunk is always on the very true bottom. So whether it's the clunk is on the very true bottom in any position, regardless how you fly, or whether it's on the ground trying to get the fuel out of this thing, whatever it is, it's a small advantage. I just like it. With that being said, the mounts are already in place. I slid this back as far as I could towards the CG. You would ideally like this thing to be right on the CG, so that way it didn't change as the fuel, was full or empty, but that's as close as we're going to get it, and it is what it is. So we're going to get that thing mounted up. Here's all the pieces that came with that tank. You got a nice rubber stopper on the front, some nice fittings and Teflon seals. They did give you a screw, a clunk with a O-ring around it, which is a neat idea. So it's not, completely, I guess, rubbing through on the bottom, but I am going to replace that with a filtered clunk. I use the same thing in my can. So this is a ceramic filter. So the fuel is filtered going into the tank, and it's filtered from here before it goes up to the carburetor. So there's really no reason for an extra fuel filter anywhere up here in this assembly. To do this, I'm also going to, this O-ring seals the fuel in there. I like to put a piece of heat shrink around the outside just to prevent this from coming loose. And in case the O-ring starts to degrade over time, it'll give me a little bit more time to notice it before I have a huge fuel leak. So we're going to mount in the throttle servo as well. We're going to find out after the tank is in where we want to epoxy that thing to the inside, keep our linkage nice and short towards the front. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to use a choke servo or not. Being that I'm using a canister and adding more weight, I'm probably going to opt to stay away from a choke servo, just so I don't overload this thing and drive the wing loading through the roof and make it a tank instead of a 3D capable plane. With that being said, once your tank is built, you just remove these little sticky pads here, put your tank in, Velcro it down. You see we put a little bling in there to hold that stuff down, and we hardened all the mounts with CA. So this stuff, you could pick the plane up with it. It ain't going anywhere. All right, let's get to work. What's included here in the Seacraft fuel tank kit, obviously the bottle. You have the screw-on cap with an O-ring there to seal, but you also have an O-ring on the inside to seal, and your fittings, and it comes with the mounting hardware and the clunk here with the little rubber O-ring around the bottom, which is kind of a neat idea. But we're not going to be using that clunk or those screws. You could see that we've used some of the bling, if I can get you guys in there to see it. We've used our anodized screws and washers in there, gave it a little bling on the inside. So here with this tank, when you go to assemble this, a couple things to note. Number one, this is how the fittings go. You're going to get a washer with this piece, the smaller end of the nipple, that will go on the inside like that. And then these nuts go through on the outside like there. Once you have this thing installed the way you want it here, and you get this thing tight, and obviously we'll tighten down those nuts on the outside. Once this is all set up and you know the orientation of your tank, you actually have two forms of sealing, but I'm actually going to use a piece of heat shrink around the outside just for extra protection, vibration, everything else. We are using a ceramic clunk on the inside of mine, so that way it's filtered here. I also use one of these in the fuel tank itself, my fuel jug where I pump into here, so it's filtered coming in and it's filtered going to the carb. So I really have no need for an additional fuel filter. Also, once you have this thing set and you know the orientation and everything is right the way you want it, whether your nipples are that way, this way, whatever, you can go ahead and use a hot iron, soldering iron or whatever, poke a nice clean small hole right there. Try not to get on too much of the bend in different contours. Try and get up into here where this thing's going to sit as the high point for you to fill and vent through the top. Now this flat piece obviously will go in the inside like that, and the nipple will stick up, and this is where your vent line is going to come off of. So from there, we're also going to put in our throttle servo. Throttle servo is going to be right up here into the top, and then we're going to mix up some epoxy and thin it out with rubbing alcohol and seal off everything on the inside, because you do get spray from the carb. Once we have the tank built, we'll remove the little felt pads and we'll permanently adhere everything in here, cleaning off the outside of this with alcohol first. So let's get to it. So here's my problem. I put this vent in the top of the tank and it goes up, makes the little loop-de-doo, and then sweeps back over, and that's all fine and dandy. And it hit the canopy on the top. So I notched out the canopy right there so that way it fit. Well, then I put my cowl on, my engine cowl, and then I can't get this thing in there now. So the solution's going to be, I'm going to put in a 90-degree fitting here in the top of the tank. So when we come out, it comes straight back, and that will get rid of the little loop-de-doo here on the top. So when you're building something the way you want it, it's never without fail. But let's get to work. All right, and there you can see we have our 90-degree fitting, and we have just enough clearance where that is right there. So in hindsight, maybe it would have been best to slide it back a little bit, but we're good now. Everything fits okay. Canopy fits nice and tight, and we're going to do a little bit of felt padding in here just to keep that vibration, that noise, rattle of the canopy down a little bit. But our vent fitting is completely good. All right, guys, and that wraps up this portion of the build series. If there was something here that piqued your interest or that you liked, do me a favor, head on over to Gator-Rc and check them out at www.gator-rc.com. They have a huge line of balsa ARFs and tons of accessories to go along with them. So with that being said, it's Brendan here at Just Plain Crazy. If you liked it, smash that thumbs up button. It helps out the channel a lot. Comment down below if there's a project you're starting or if they carry a plane that you're interested in. I'd actually be really interested to know what you guys like. With that being said, like, share, subscribe, and all that cool stuff that goes along with that. I hope you join me again for the rest of this video series and more down the road. So with that being said, happy flights, guys. Peace out.